Okay, we're going to finish up the Iliad today with the battle between Hector and Achilles, which is the climax of the fighting in the Iliad. Um, and the two of them eventually square off to fight. Book 22, lines 247 to 366, where when they do finally square off to fight, after Hector is finished trying to run from him, and the gods trick him into fighting Achilles by appearing in disguise um, as his brother. Um, Hector speaks to Achilles. And I'm not going to run anymore. Now my heart tells me to stand and face you to kill or be killed. But he asks them to agree on one thing. Come, let us swear an oath before the gods. If Zeus lets me kill you and survive, then when I've stripped you of your glorious armor, I'll not mistreat your corpse. I'll return your body to your people. And you promise to do the same for me. And Achilles refuses. He has no sympathy. And so they fight, and as Hector now lies dying, to emphasize this, Homer has him repeat. He begs Achilles, don't let the dogs devour my flesh by the hollow ships. Accept the ransom my royal father and mother will offer, stores of gold and bronze, and let them carry my body home, so the Trojans and their wives may grant me in death my portion of fire. Let them bury my body, or actually it looks like burn it, as their burial customs were. And look at Achilles' response. Don't speak of my parents, dog. I wish the fury and the pain in me could drive me to carve and eat you raw for what you did. No living man will keep the dogs from gnawing at your skull. Not if men weighed out 20, 30 times your worth in ransom and promised even more. Not if your father gave me your weight in gold. No dice. And you know what Hector was asking for was nothing more than was customary. Do you happen to know any of the history of what is now our West Campus? During World War II, it was a prisoner of war camp. They called it Camp Ruston. German and Italian POWs taken prisoner in North Africa were brought here because the Geneva Convention specified that they had to be housed in a climate similar to where they were taken prisoner. And so they were brought here. Now, some of them had been wounded and would eventually die from those wounds. Others died of disease, fighting with each other. Whenever you have a lot of people confined in a small space, That's a breeding ground for disease. That's frankly why we've had a harder time with COVID than much of the rest of the world has had. In Europe, they shut down a lot quicker and a lot more completely than we did. And because they did that, they were able to stop the spread. We refuse to do that. And people here won't avoid large crowds and refuse to wear masks. And so our numbers are much, much worse because that contact spreads the disease. Well, what do you suppose happened to the bodies of those dead soldiers? Were they just those dead POWs? They just throw them out with the garbage? The answer is no. Now, they could not return the bodies during the war. There was no traffic going back and forth to Germany and Italy from the United States. Now, after the war, the families had the option of having the bodies returned. They were buried in body bags so that could be done. But they were buried with full military honors, with their coffin draped in the flag of their country, the playing of taps, the firing of a 21-gun salute by the guards, of course. You do not give prisoners guns. But that's long been the military tradition of respecting your opponent, of treating their dead the same way you treat your own dead. And that's all Hector's asking for. And Achilles refuses. And in fact, Achilles drags Hector's body, strings it up from the ankles, and drags it around behind his chariot as he drives round and around outside the city of Troy. Just in absolute rage and fury against Hector for killing his friend. I mean, he is inhuman in his wrath. So much so that even the Greek gods are offended. And warn Achilles that he's going too far. Now, in the process of Patroclus' funeral, he hosts some athletic games. You know it's the ancient Greeks who invented the original Olympics, right? And he offers the prizes, and in doing so, he winds up reconciling with Agamemnon, who has given Briseis back, sworn he never touched her. But when Agamemnon rises to compete for a prize, Achilles knows full well he's doing it because he wants that prize. And so he declares Agamemnon the winner without even allowing the competition, because he knows Agamemnon might not really win. And so he's reconciled with Agamemnon. At night, book 24, lines 468 to 451, Priam sneaks into the Greek camp at night, and he comes to Achilles' hut, and he clasps his knees and kisses Achilles' hand. Now, those are gestures in the ancient world of supplication. You are begging someone who has power over you to do you a favor, to show you mercy. And Achilles can't believe that Priam would come to him like this. And when Priam goes to beg for Achilles to accept the ransom that he has brought in exchange for Hector's body, look at how he does that. God, like Achilles, think of your own father, who's of my generation. You know, Priam and Achilles' father Peleus are about the same age. And so likewise is on the sad threshold of old age. Perhaps his neighbors are troubling and there is no one to protect him from harm or ward off ruin. You know, he's an old man. He can't fight anymore. Newsflash. As you get older, you get weaker and your energy levels decline. Trust me. But at least he can rejoice in the knowledge that you're alive, and each day brings the hope of seeing you return from Troy. You know, he hears that you're still alive, and so he's hoping to see you come home one of these days. I am a victim of sad fate. Of the best of my sons, the best in all of Troy, not one is left. 50 sons I had when you Achaeans landed. 19 by the one wife, his primary wife, Hecabe. The rest by other ladies of my court, his concubines. As a king, he has a harem. Most of them have fallen in furious battle. And the defender of the city and its people, my prime recourse, Hector, you have killed as he fought for his country. I've come now to the ships to beg his corpse from you, bringing a princely ransom. Respect the gods, Achilles, and show mercy towards me, remembering your own father, for I am more to be pitied than he, since I have brought myself to do what no other man on earth would do. I have lifted to my lips the hand of the man who killed my sons. And his words touch Achilles, and as who thinks about his own father and the grief that his father will feel when he doesn't come home, because Priam doesn't know that Achilles is fated to die in this war now that Hector is dead. But Achilles does know it. And in book 24, lines 552 to 620, Achilles grants Priam's request. But he warns Priam, don't press me. I've decided to return Hector's body. But don't try to move my heart further, lest I defy Zeus's command and choose, suppliant though you are, not to spare even you. And then he tells his friends to go get Hector's body, and he tells the servant girls to clean Hector's body up, but to do it in a place where Priam could not see, lest his grief at the sight provoke his anger, and Achilles be angered in reply, and kill him in defiance of Zeus's command. See, what Achilles is afraid of is that if Priam starts grieving when he sees Hector's body, that Achilles might lose his temper and kill the old man who is his guest. Because in the ancient world, the absolute worst thing you could possibly do was to injure a guest. There were no hotels in the ancient world. What are sometimes called inns were actually the kind of establishment that rented a room by the hour. If you understand what kind of business establishment that might be. The room did come with a bed, but you didn't sleep in the bed. You did something else. When people were traveling away from home, they were dependent on strangers to take them in and house them and feed them. And hospitality was a command of the divine in the ancient world. In fact, this shows up in the book of Genesis in a story that's most commonly misunderstood, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The story in its original context is not about homosexuality. Lot and his family take in these strangers. Now, in the story, they're meant to be angels, but nobody in the story knows that. And the men of Sodom are banging on the door, wanting Lot to turn these strangers over to them so that they can rape them. But the reason that they want to rape them is not because they're raving homosexuals. It's a way of showing these people from out of town that they are nobody here. We can treat you like women. Women were not treated very well in the ancient world. Rape is not ultimately a crime about sex. It is a crime of violence. Rapists don't like women. And they're wanting to show a woman that she is nobody to them. And the proof that that's what the story is about, hospitality, is that Lot offers the crowd his own daughters instead of his guests. Now that offer makes no sense if the motive behind the mob is homosexual in nature. But it makes perfect sense in the context of hospitality in the ancient world. It is so important that Lot protect his guests that he offers his daughters instead. And this shows the utter depravity, the contempt of strangers, of which Sodom is guilty. That is the true sin of Sodom and Gomorrah, is the way they treat strangers. It is not homosexuality. That contempt of strangers is expressed sexually, just like the violence against women is expressed sexually in sexual assault. But it's not really about sex. It's about dominance. Achilles is terrified that he will lose his temper and commit the worst sin that there could possibly be and kill his guest Priam. And Achilles then makes a truce with Priam, asks, how long do you need to conduct a proper burial for a Trojan prince? He doesn't know their customs. And he gives Priam a truce. There'll be no fighting during this period of time so that Hector can get the kind of burial that he deserves as a Trojan prince. And at that point, essentially, the Iliad ends. Homer doesn't go on and tell about the Trojan horse and the fall of Troy. He ends before the Trojan War does, because he's not really writing about the war. He is writing about the people who are caught up in the war and their attempts to give meaning and value to their lives. And if I can try to sum up the message of the Iliad in a line or two, it would be this: that in order to give our lives meaning and value as human beings, we have to do that ourselves. We have to stand on our own 2 feet and make our lives have some meaning and some value. And the first stage in doing that is to control ourselves, and specifically our emotions, our passions. Until we can do that, we are nothing but slaves to the subhuman forces within us. If we're going to stand on our own 2 feet as human beings and give our lives meaning and value, we must first and foremost control our own emotions. And that's going to lead us to what we'll be talking about in our next module with the Hellenic era.